When we think of Christmas films that became cultural landmarks, the mind goes immediately to Home Alone, a movie that started almost quietly as a mid-budget family comedy and unexpectedly grew into one of the most iconic holiday films ever made. But the story of how it came to life is much more layered. It includes a script written almost by accident, studios doubting its potential, last-minute decisions, and a cast whose lives would change permanently after its release.
Before we begin, take a slow breath in and a soft breath out. Let your shoulders drop and let the day settle a little. And if you enjoy these gentle, calm narrations, and if they help you unwind or fall asleep, you can like the video. And tomorrow morning when you wake up fresh and rested, leave me a little heart in the comments, just to let me know you'd like more calm pop stories like this one. When you're ready, we can begin.
The idea began with screenwriter John Hughes, who, in the late 1980s, was already known for a long list of successful films: The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Hughes had a unique ability to mix humor with everyday emotional experiences. In this case, the initial spark came from something extremely simple. While preparing for a family trip, he thought about what would happen if a child was accidentally left behind. That single question was enough for Hughes to draft a full script in just a few days, something very typical of him. He wrote fast, relying on instinct, and he had a clear idea. The film needed to be both comedic and emotionally warm, something that could work for children and adults at the same time. At first, the project was under Warner Bros., but almost immediately the studio felt the budget was too high for what they considered just a Christmas comedy. Hughes believed in the story much more than they did. This conflict pushed him to secretly keep negotiations open with another studio, 20th Century Fox. When Fox realized the potential of the script and the fact that Hughes himself would produce it, they decided to take the project over. This moment is one of those subtle turning points in cinema history. If Fox hadn't intervened, Home Alone might never have existed, or it might have been a much smaller film. With the studio change confirmed, Hughes needed a director who could handle both physical comedy and heartfelt family moments. He chose Chris Columbus, who had previously worked on Gremlins and The Goonies. Columbus had a sensitive, character-focused approach that perfectly balanced Hughes' writing style. Their collaboration would later become one of the most famous writer-director partnerships of that era. At the center of the film, there was the biggest question: who could play Kevin McAllister? Hughes already had someone in mind, a child actor he had worked with on Uncle Buck, Macaulay Culkin. Even at a very young age, Culkin had a natural presence on camera. He wasn't performing. He was simply himself, and he made every moment believable. The casting team still auditioned hundreds of kids, but in the end, the choice returned exactly to Culkin. His face, his timing, and even his physical fragility made him the perfect Kevin. Behind him, the film needed a strong supporting cast to create a believable family. Catherine O'Hara, already known for her work in comedy, was chosen to play Kevin's mother, Kate. Her performance would become one of the emotional centers of the entire story. For the role of the father, Peter, they cast John Hurd, who at first wasn't convinced by the tone of the script, but eventually accepted, later admitting he was grateful for it. Then came the villains, Harry and Marv, the two burglars. The casting of Joe Pesci as Harry was unusual. At the time, Pesci was known mainly for intense dramatic roles. In fact, he was filming Goodfellas at almost the same time. But Hughes and Columbus believed his sharpness would contrast perfectly with the film's light-hearted tone. His partner in crime, Marv, was given to Daniel Stern, whose comedic timing matched Pesci's more abrasive energy. Together, they would become one of the most memorable duos in holiday cinema. The team was complete, the story was strong, and the production was ready. But no one could have predicted how big this movie would become. The production phase of the film began in early 1990, and although it was a family comedy on the surface, the logistics behind it were surprisingly complex. Most of the story takes place inside a single house, yet that house had to function almost like a character itself. The team eventually found a property in Winnetka, Illinois, a wealthy Chicago suburb that perfectly matched the visual idea of an ideal American family home. It had warmth, space, and the classic suburban look, but inside it needed major modifications. Many of the interiors, in fact, were not filmed inside the real house at all. Instead, the team recreated most rooms inside a disused high school building, turning the old gymnasium into a working soundstage. This allowed them to build removable walls and place cameras in positions that would be impossible in an actual home. Even the basement scenes, especially those involving the furnace, were built from scratch. That furnace, which scared Kevin so much, wasn't real. It was a combination of puppetry, lighting tricks, and practical effects designed to make it feel like a living creature. Chris Columbus wanted every detail to reflect how a child perceives a house when left alone, with ordinary objects suddenly becoming intimidating. Meanwhile, Macaulay Culkin was becoming the center of attention on set. He was only 10 years old, but his work ethic was striking. Columbus often mentioned how Culkin rarely forgot a line and how he handled long shooting days with natural ease. Yet, he was still a child, and the production worked around his schedule to ensure he wasn't overwhelmed. Much of the film's charm comes from Culkin's spontaneity. The iconic moment where Kevin screams in front of the mirror after applying aftershave wasn't originally scripted as a full scream. The script only said, "Kevin reacts." But Culkin instinctively kept his hands on his face and screamed, turning it into one of the most recognizable shots in modern comedy. Columbus understood immediately that authenticity was more valuable than sticking rigidly to the script. Working with Pesci was another daily adventure. He was used to improvising, to inserting intensity into every line. But here he had to restrain himself because the film needed to remain family-friendly. Pesci had a habit of accidentally swearing on set, so the team asked him to invent nonsense words to avoid ruining scenes. That's how Harry's strange muttered insults were born, half gibberish, half growled threats, which ended up adding a unique flavor to his character. Daniel Stern, on the other hand, embraced physical comedy completely. Many of the stunts looked painful, but were carefully choreographed. Still, Stern did several pratfalls himself, even though stunt doubles were on standby. One of his most famous moments, when Marv steps on a nail, was faked through camera angles and a special platform. But the tension on his face was real acting. Stern later said that imagining that pain was enough to make the expression genuine. The emotional core of the film came from Catherine O'Hara, whose scenes had to balance comedy with the fear of a mother who realizes she has left her child behind. Her performance provided gravity to the story. Without O'Hara's sincerity, the film could have felt too cartoonish. Interestingly, she didn't want her character to appear negligent or unloving. In every scene, even the comedic ones, she played Kate as someone deeply connected to her son. This is part of why her desperate attempts to return home feel believable. The audience roots for her because O'Hara gives the character humanity. Another key decision that shaped the film was the music. John Hughes and Chris Columbus approached John Williams almost on a whim. Williams was one of the most respected composers in cinema, known for Star Wars, Jaws, and E.T. No one expected him to accept a small family comedy. but Williams loved the script's combination of mischief and heart and agreed to compose the score. His contribution elevated the film enormously. The now familiar main theme gives Home Alone a sense of timeless magic. Without that score, the film would lack a significant portion of its emotional weight. As filming progressed, the budget slowly increased, causing nervousness again at the studio. But Fox decided to trust Hughes and Columbus. They felt something special was happening, even if they couldn't predict the scale. The chemistry between the cast, the balance between comedy and sentiment, and Culkin's effortless charisma created a unique atmosphere. Everyone felt it, even if they didn't yet understand what the film would become once released. When production wrapped, Columbus edited the movie with a focus on rhythm. He wanted the film to feel lively but never rushed, letting both comedy and emotional beats breathe. Early test screenings were surprisingly strong. Families responded with laughter, children were excited, and parents found the story relatable. Fox realized they had something bigger than a seasonal film. They decided to release it in November 1990, perfectly in time for the holiday season. What happened next was beyond prediction. The film didn't just open well, it exploded. Word of mouth was enormous. Families went multiple times. Children quoted the lines. And the traps that Kevin sets in the third act became some of the most replayed scenes of the decade. The movie stayed at #1 in the U.S. box office for 12 consecutive weeks, an almost unheard of achievement for a comedy. It eventually became the highest-grossing live-action comedy of all time, a record it held for many years. For a film that began quietly, filmed partially in a high school gym, and nearly abandoned by its first studio, the success was unprecedented. As Home Alone grew into a phenomenon, the cast began experiencing major shifts in their careers. Macaulay Culkin became the most famous child actor in the world, practically overnight. For Catherine O'Hara, it became one of the defining roles of her early career. Joe Pesci, who had just won an Oscar for Goodfellas, showed audiences he could be both terrifying and funny. And Daniel Stern cemented his reputation as a versatile comedic actor. The combination of all these elements created a film that audiences would return to every year, transforming it into an essential part of holiday traditions around the world. After the overwhelming success of the first film, the question wasn't whether there would be a sequel, but how to approach it without diluting what made the original so impactful. John Hughes and Chris Columbus understood that repeating the same formula without expanding the world would not be enough. Audiences wanted Kevin back, but they also wanted something larger, something that pushed the boundaries while staying true to the emotional center of the story. So Hughes began writing a sequel that would follow the same underlying themes: independence, fear, growth, but on a grander scale. This time, Kevin wouldn't just be left home alone. He would be misplaced in an entirely different city. And not just any city. He would be set loose in New York. Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, was conceived as a bigger, more cinematic adventure. The choice of New York was deliberate. The city had a mythic presence in early 90s cinema, full of recognizable landmarks and a sense of wonder that matched the tone of the films Hughes wanted to write. It also provided opportunities to contrast Kevin's small, suburban life with the overwhelming scale of Manhattan. Kevin running through the Plaza Hotel, wandering Central Park, exploring toy stores and skyscrapers, it all gave the story a larger-than-life feeling that connected to children's fantasies at the time. Once again, the key was the cast. Macaulay Culkin returned as Kevin, and although he was still very young, he was now one of the most famous faces in the world. His fame came with challenges. On set, crowds gathered wherever the production went, hoping to catch a glimpse of him. Columbus later said that managing the logistics around Culkin's public visibility felt almost like handling a major politician. Still, Culkin remained professional, delivering scenes with the same mixture of innocence and confidence that defined him in the first film. But off-camera, the pressure on him was immense. His career became inseparable from his family dynamics, particularly with his father, Kit Culkin, who gained a reputation in Hollywood for being demanding and difficult to work with. This tension would eventually affect Macaulay's future in the industry. Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern returned as Harry and Marv, the Wet Bandits, now rebranded as the Sticky Bandits. Their chemistry was still strong, and they leaned even more into the physical comedy. Filming the trap sequences was more elaborate this time due to the scale of the settings. In New York, the crew used real streets when possible, but many interior sequences, including the renovated townhouse with Kevin's traps, were again built on sound stages in Chicago. Daniel Stern has said that filming the more intense stunts was exhausting but fun, and that the exaggerated pain reactions became almost a trademark of his character. Pesci once again had to restrain himself from swearing. He wanted Harry to feel more exasperated, more out of control, but within the boundaries of a family film. The introduction of new characters added emotional depth. Brenda Fricker played the Pigeon Lady, a quiet and isolated figure living in Central Park. Her scenes with Kevin gave the film a more reflective tone. She symbolized fear, loneliness, and the desire for connection, echoing Kevin's own struggles despite the difference in age and circumstances. Their conversations in the attic of Carnegie Hall are still remembered as some of the most heartfelt moments in the film. Another key addition was Tim Curry as the suspicious concierge of the Plaza Hotel. Curry embraced the role with theatrical humor, giving the film an expressive antagonist who balanced the darker tones of the New York setting. His exaggerated facial expressions and dry delivery made him instantly iconic in the franchise. The film also benefited again from John Williams' music. His score for the second film expanded on themes from the original, adding a slightly grander, more adventurous tone. He incorporated motifs inspired by Christmas carols, but infused them with a sense of urban excitement. Williams' work once again elevated the narrative, giving emotional unity to scenes that might otherwise feel disparate. When the sequel was released in 1992, it performed extremely well at the box office. Though it didn't surpass the record-breaking performance of the first film, it still became one of the top-grossing films of the year. Critics were divided. Some felt it repeated too many beats from the first film, but audiences, especially families, embraced it. For many viewers, Home Alone 2 became just as much of a holiday tradition as the original. The images of Kevin inside the plaza, the snowy streets of New York, and the dramatic third act inside the townhouse are still central to Christmas pop culture. However, the success of the sequel also marked the beginning of a complicated period for the franchise. Macaulay Culkin was at the peak of his fame, but the pressures behind the scenes became increasingly difficult. His family situation grew more strained, and Hollywood's focus on him became overwhelming. By the mid-90s, Culkin stepped away from acting almost entirely. He wouldn't return to the industry in a stable way for many years. Today, Culkin has a more peaceful, self-directed career, appearing in select projects and embracing his place in pop culture without letting it define him. As for the franchise itself, the success of the first two films sparked attempts to continue the story without Culkin. In the late 90s and early 2000s, new sequels were released with different casts and new versions of the central premise. But none came close to the cultural impact of the original duo.
The charm of Home Alone and Home Alone 2 depended on a very specific mix of elements: Hughes' writing, Columbus's direction, Culkin's performance, the chemistry of the villains, and the emotional sincerity brought by actors like O'Hara and Fricker. When one piece of that formula was removed, the magic was harder to recreate. Meanwhile, the legacy of the original films continued to grow. Every Christmas, millions of households rewatched the same scenes. Kevin walking through his silent house, the burglars stepping into elaborate traps, Kate McAllister racing through airports, and the iconic moment when Kevin realizes he is truly alone. The films entered a special cultural space, not just holiday entertainment, but comforting rituals passed from one generation to the next. Children who watched the movies in the 90s grew up and introduced them to their own families. The images became symbolic: the snowy Chicago suburbs, the warm glow of Christmas lights, and the sense of childlike independence that defined Kevin's world. Over time, the films also shaped the careers of several cast members in subtle ways. Catherine O'Hara, for example, already respected at the time, moved on to build a remarkable career in television and comedy. Decades later, she would experience a second wave of admiration thanks to her role in Schitt's Creek, where audiences once again appreciated her versatility. Joe Pesci, following his chaotic comedic turn as Harry, returned primarily to dramatic roles, eventually coming back for acclaimed works like The Irishman. Daniel Stern continued acting and directing, gaining recognition for his narration in The Wonder Years. Even actors with smaller roles, like Devin Rattray, who played Buzz, became cult figures among fans. In this way, Home Alone wasn't just a film. It was a launch pad, a holiday tradition, and a piece of cinema that continued to influence the careers and lives of the people who made it. And decades after its release, its impact shows no signs of fading. Perfetto. Continuo subito con il chunk 4, lungo, scorrevole, senza titoli e nello stesso tono. While the first two films secured their status as classics, the broader Home Alone franchise took a different path throughout the late 90s and 2000s. Studios were eager to keep the momentum going, but without the original team, and especially without Macaulay Culkin, the emotional center of the story shifted. What followed became a case study in how difficult it is to recreate a cultural phenomenon once its essential ingredients change. The third film, released in 1997, introduced an entirely new cast and centered on a different child protagonist played by Alex D. Linz. Written by John Hughes but directed by Raja Gosnell, it attempted to capture the same blend of comedy and mischief, but the absence of Kevin McAllister created a disconnect for fans. Although the film introduced a more elaborate, almost cartoonish plot involving spies and microchips, audiences missed the emotional simplicity and relatability of the original. The neighborhood didn't have the same warmth, the villains didn't have the same charisma, and the traps lacked the grounded domestic feel that made the first film resonate. Hughes later said that he wrote the script as a standalone story, but the studio's decision to brand it under the Home Alone title shaped its reception. It performed modestly, but never reached the cultural relevance of the earlier films. The franchise then entered a quieter phase. Several years passed before Home Alone 4 and Home Alone 5 appeared, both made-for-TV films. These installments attempted once again to recreate elements of the original, reviving character names like Kevin and Buzz, but with entirely new actors and new interpretive choices. Narratively, they tried to return to suburban households and mischievous traps, but the tone had shifted. Without the specific combination of warmth, humor, and cinematic craftsmanship that defined the 1990 and 1992 films, these sequels felt more like reinterpretations than true continuations. They gained some following among younger audiences, but lacked the enduring power of the originals.
The franchise had moved from cinema to television, from cultural landmark to seasonal content.
Meanwhile, a different type of legacy was taking shape behind the scenes. As the 2000s progressed, the careers of the original cast members evolved, sometimes following paths shaped indirectly by their Home Alone fame. Catherine O'Hara continued working steadily in film and television, earning critical appreciation for her comedic precision. In interviews, she often recalled that fans still approached her about her role as Kate McAllister more than almost anything else she had done before her later career renaissance. John Hurd, who played Kevin's father, occupied a unique space in Hollywood. He worked in a variety of roles across films and series, sometimes comedic, sometimes dramatic. His presence remained familiar to audiences who had grown up with the franchise. Sadly, Hurd passed away in 2017, prompting many viewers to revisit the films with renewed nostalgia. Joe Pesci, whose appearance in Home Alone was a departure from his usual roles, eventually stepped away from acting for nearly 2 decades before returning for The Irishman. He occasionally joked about how many people still recognized him more for Harry than for his dramatic work. Daniel Stern maintained a steady career in film and television, including directing, and he became a familiar narrator for a whole generation through the Wonder Years. Even Roberts Blossom, the actor who played Old Man Marley, the mysterious neighbor whose quiet wisdom becomes pivotal in Kevin's emotional arc, left a lasting impression despite limited screen time. His scenes in the first film remain some of the most touching, grounding the story in themes of forgiveness and fear. As the films continued circulating on television and streaming platforms, their influence extended far beyond the cast. The imagery of Home Alone shaped Christmas advertising, inspired countless parodies, and influenced how other family comedies were written. Kevin's booby traps directly inspired sequences in later films featuring exaggerated physical humor, from holiday specials to animated series. The structure of a child navigating independence, misunderstood by adults, underestimated by villains, became a widely reused formula. Many directors have admitted that Hughes' scripts set a blueprint for mixing comedy with heartfelt moments in children's films. The franchise saw yet another attempt at revival in 2021 with Home Sweet Home Alone, produced by Disney after acquiring Fox. This version introduced new characters, new parents, new burglars, and a modern setting. It also included a small cameo by Devin Rattray as Buzz McAllister, now a police officer, connecting it loosely to the original universe. Reception was mixed. Some appreciated the attempt to bring the story to a new generation, while others felt the modern humor and tone lacked the sincerity of the 90s versions. Still, its release renewed discussions about the enduring appeal of the franchise and what made it resonate so strongly in the first place. Parallel to all these revivals, Macaulay Culkin's personal journey continued to evolve. After stepping away from acting in the mid-90s, he returned slowly and cautiously, choosing smaller, more selective roles. He experimented with voice acting, independent films, and even created a comedy project named Bunny Ears, reflecting his wit and self-awareness. Fans who remembered him as Kevin watched his gradual return with affection, understanding that his childhood fame had come with immense pressures. Today, Culkin enjoys a quieter, more balanced life, and he speaks openly about preferring projects that interest him rather than those that capitalize on nostalgia. He acknowledges the cultural significance of Home Alone, but avoids letting it define him, a difficult balance for someone whose childhood face is associated with one of the most famous films of all time. During the same years, Chris Columbus built a powerful directing career. After the Home Alone films, he directed Mrs. Doubtfire, followed by launching the first 2 Harry Potter movies, an enormous shift that brought his family-friendly sensibility to a new global phenomenon. John Hughes, meanwhile, became more private in the 2000s, writing under pseudonyms and withdrawing from Hollywood's spotlight. His death in 2009 marked the end of an era for those who considered him one of the most influential screenwriters in American cinema. In retrospect, Home Alone represents a significant part of his legacy, not only because of its popularity, but because it distilled Hughes's greatest strengths: emotionally accessible stories, characters that felt real, and an understanding of childhood that resonated across generations. The cultural persistence of Home Alone can be attributed to several interconnected elements. The films tap into universal childhood fantasies: the dream of being independent, the thrill of solving problems without adults, the fear of being left behind, and the satisfaction of overcoming that fear. At the same time, the films appeal to adults who recognize the emotional core: guilt, family bonds, the chaos of holidays, and the realization that small misunderstandings can create major consequences. It is a rare blend of tones where slapstick comedy coexists with tenderness and holiday nostalgia without diminishing either. With each passing decade, the films feel less like productions from a particular era and more like timeless stories that reconnect viewers with their younger selves. And this is perhaps why they continue to attract new audiences long after their original release. As the years went by, Home Alone didn't just survive as a holiday film. It became one of the most persistent pieces of pop culture across generations. Part of this longevity comes from the way the movie shaped the childhoods of millions of viewers, especially those who grew up in the 1990s and early 2000s. For many families, watching Kevin defend his house became as much a Christmas ritual as decorating a tree or preparing holiday meals. Parents who first saw the film as children now introduce it to their own kids, and those kids often react with the same wide-eyed fascination at the traps, the humor, and the emotional journey of the story. This intergenerational connection speaks to something deeper. The film captures emotions that children and adults share, just experienced from different angles. Children relate to Kevin's sense of unfairness when no one listens to him, his mix of fear and excitement at being alone, and the satisfaction of proving to himself that he can handle challenges independently. Adults, meanwhile, feel the anxiety of Kate McAllister's desperate attempt to return home, the chaos of holiday preparations, and the painful awareness that a single oversight can have enormous consequences. The film blends these perspectives so seamlessly that viewers of all ages find something familiar in Kevin's world. Another reason for the film's enduring presence is its visual style. Chris Columbus and cinematographer Julio Macad designed the look of the first movie with warm, saturated colors, reds, greens, golden lights, creating an atmosphere that feels quintessentially festive. The interior of the McAllister house practically glows, with decorations in almost every frame. This wasn't accidental. Columbus wanted the house to resemble a nostalgic memory, an idealized version of Christmas that viewers could recognize instantly. The result is a visual identity so strong that even a single still image from the film can evoke holiday nostalgia. The soundtrack plays an equally important role. John Williams' music doesn't just support the story, it elevates it, weaving through scenes with a mix of whimsy, melancholy, and grandeur. Themes like "Somewhere in My Memory" have become instantly recognizable, performed by choirs and orchestras around the world during the Christmas season. The score bridges the emotional layers of the film. It makes Kevin's quiet moments feel introspective, enhances the magic of snowfall outside the house, and adds a touch of epic adventure to the scenes of mischief and traps. Many viewers associate Christmas itself with the opening notes of the film's main theme, showing how deeply the soundtrack has embedded itself into collective memory. Beyond its audiovisual impact,
Home Alone shaped the careers not only of its main cast, but also of those working behind the camera. Julio Macaulay, for example, made his debut as a cinematographer on the film. His work on Home Alone opened the door to a long career in Hollywood, including comedies like Ace Ventura, Wedding Crashers, and Pitch Perfect. His approach to visual warmth and holiday lighting became references for future family films. Similarly, production designer John Muto created sets that blended realism with theatricality. His detailed reconstruction of the McAllister interiors inside the school gym allowed for fluid camera movement and complex stunt setups, influencing the visual style of later comedies and holiday movies. The success of the franchise also played a role in expanding Chris Columbus's career. His ability to balance family sentiment with large-scale production challenges attracted the attention of studios looking to build new blockbuster series. This eventually led him to direct the first two Harry Potter films, where he demonstrated the same sensitivity toward young actors and magical settings that he had shown in Home Alone. In many ways, Columbus's work on Kevin's story became a template for how he approached the wizarding world, mixing humor, wonder, and emotional grounding to create stories that appealed to wide audiences. Meanwhile, John Hughes' influence continued to be felt long after the films were made. His writing style, characterized by simple premises elevated through character depth, inspired countless screenwriters. Hughes had a remarkable ability to take everyday family situations, holiday stress, sibling rivalry, miscommunication, and turn them into narratives that felt universal. Even after his retreat from public life, his scripts remained foundational in American cinema, studied for their blend of humor, pacing, and warm emotional arcs. Home Alone stands among his most accessible works, combining his comedic instincts with an understanding of childhood vulnerability. Culturally, the film also became a reference point far outside the world of cinema. It influenced holiday advertising, comedic sketches, and even travel marketing campaigns. Tourism boards referenced the streets of Chicago and New York through Home Alone imagery during winter promotions. The Plaza Hotel became a destination for fans wanting to relive Kevin's adventure, even offering themed packages. Department stores recreated the toy shop atmosphere from the second film, complete with oversized decorations and charitable donation themes. In the broader landscape of film history, Home Alone marked an important moment for family entertainment. It arrived during a period when Hollywood was transitioning between eras. The 80s had seen teen coming-of-age films and high-concept blockbusters, while the early 90s began focusing more on films that appealed to entire families. The success of Home Alone demonstrated that family films could be commercially dominant without relying solely on animation or fantasy settings. It blended realism with whimsical elements in a way that felt fresh, contributing to the rise of other live-action family comedies throughout the decade. At the same time, the film's legacy intersects with discussions about violence in comedy. The traps Kevin sets are exaggerated and framed for humor, but they sparked debates about slapstick intensity in children's films. Some critics argued that the injuries depicted, falls, burns, electrocution gags, were too extreme. Yet the film's physical comedy draws from traditions stretching back to silent cinema. Columbus and Hughes cited influences like Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin, and Looney Tunes, where exaggerated pain is symbolic rather than realistic. The villains survive impossible situations without lasting harm, reinforcing the film's comedic tone rather than encouraging real-world imitation. Still, the cultural debate contributed to the film's notoriety, and in a paradoxical way made it even more talked about. Today, these sequences are remembered as iconic parts of the holiday season. They have been parodied and referenced endlessly, from The Simpsons to modern-day TikTok recreations. Some fans even calculate which injuries would be survivable in real life, adding a layer of comedic analysis to the film's most chaotic moments. Over time, Home Alone also became a window into the late 20th century. The film captures a version of suburban life that feels distant in an era of smartphones, constant connectivity, and security systems. The idea of a child being left behind due to miscommunication feels almost impossible today, where technology tracks every detail. Yet this shift in reality has only strengthened the film's nostalgic appeal. It represents a moment when neighborhoods felt quieter, travel felt simpler, and children had more unstructured freedom. That sense of temporal distance adds to the film's charm, making it not just entertainment, but a time capsule. Decades later, the franchise continues to be rediscovered by new generations, demonstrating how stories built on emotional honesty remain relevant even as society changes. The heart of the film, a child overcoming fear, a family learning to cherish each other, and the holiday magic that ties everything together remains universal. As the films continued to circulate year after year, something interesting happened. Home Alone stopped being simply a movie and became a cultural ritual embedded in the collective imagination. Its themes, characters, and even individual lines entered everyday vocabulary, quoted casually during the holiday season. This transformation wasn't orchestrated by marketing campaigns or deliberate studio strategies. It happened organically, driven by how people adopted the film into their personal traditions. Part of this transformation came from the way the film intersects with memory. For viewers who first saw it as children, the experience of watching Kevin navigate a quiet house, confront burglars, and eventually reunite with his family became symbolic of childhood itself. A moment of vulnerability turned into triumph. That memory stayed with them, evolving into a source of comfort. When they watch the film decades later, they aren't just consuming a piece of entertainment, they're reconnecting with who they were at the time. This emotional echo is something few films achieve and is one of the reasons Home Alone remains so powerful. The continued popularity also shaped how media networks handled the franchise. In many countries, the films became fixed anchors in holiday programming schedules. Broadcasters knew that airing Home Alone guaranteed high viewership numbers, often outperforming newer releases. Families structured their evenings around the broadcast. Over time, the films became part of national traditions, especially in Europe, where in several countries, Home Alone consistently ranks among the most watched films on television during Christmas week. The ritual surrounding it became so strong that any deviation, such as skipping an annual broadcast, sparked public disappointment and even news stories. In the age of streaming, the films found new life. Platforms added them to their holiday favorites lists, making them even more accessible. Suddenly, viewers could revisit the movies anytime, not just during December. Yet, most still preferred watching them at the same time of year, reinforcing the idea that Home Alone has become part of the seasonal rhythm. Even younger viewers, accustomed to binge watching and rapid consumption of content, embraced Kevin's story. This generational adoption ensured the franchise's survival in an era where many older films fade into obscurity. The emotional core of Home Alone also gained new interpretations over time. Modern viewers increasingly focus on the film's exploration of childhood independence. Kevin's journey isn't just comedic, it reflects a deeper psychological arc. He begins feeling overlooked and misunderstood within a chaotic family environment. Left behind, he confronts fear of the furnace, fear of burglars, fear of being truly alone, and gradually overcomes it. Viewers recognize that Kevin doesn't simply enjoy being unsupervised, he learns resilience. This progression mirrors real childhood development, where building autonomy is a crucial milestone. Psychologists often point out that stories like Home Alone resonate because they dramatize a universal process, the tension between wanting independence and needing protection. Meanwhile, the film's portrayal of the McAllister family gained renewed attention. Some modern audiences critique the family's chaotic dynamic, their distracted behavior, and the exaggerated nature of forgetting a child. Yet others note that the McAllisters reflect a very realistic, if heightened, portrayal of holiday stress. Large families rushing to catch flights, balancing different needs, and struggling with communication. These are familiar challenges amplified for comedic effect. The scenes of Kate's frantic journey to return home resonate deeply with parents, capturing the mix of guilt, urgency, and determination that comes with protecting a child. At the same time, the villains, Harry and Marv, evolved from simple comedic antagonists into cultural icons in their own right. Fans analyze their scenes, recreate their pratfalls, and debate which trap was the most dangerous or memorable. Their exaggerated resilience has become a running joke, symbolizing a type of comedic violence that belongs to a very specific era of filmmaking. Many comedians and filmmakers cite Pesci and Stern's performances as influences, highlighting their ability to combine physical humor with exaggerated personality. Over the years, fans have also developed a niche fascination with the McAllister house itself. The red brick home in Winnetka became a pilgrimage site, with visitors taking photos outside and imagining Kevin running through its hallways. The owners eventually embraced the attention, while also navigating the practical challenges of living in a famous filming location. Real estate discussions frequently reference the house, using it as a cultural benchmark for suburban architecture. Interior designers break down the film's color palette, noting how the dominant reds and greens quietly reinforce the Christmas atmosphere. In recent years, the house was even rented out through short-term rental platforms with themed experiences, letting fans step briefly into Kevin's world. The franchise also inspired an entire subculture of online content. Fans create analyses, parodies, and even academic essays. Some debate logistical questions. How much would the damage from the traps cost? How wealthy is the McAllister family based on the size of the house and their travel plans? What did Peter McAllister do for a living? Others explore thematic elements, such as the symbolism of isolation, or the way the film portrays childhood anxieties and triumphs. These discussions keep the film alive in digital spaces, connecting viewers across different countries and ages. Meanwhile, the cast continued to reflect on their experiences. Catherine O'Hara often mentioned that despite all the roles she's played, strangers consistently quote lines from Home Alone to her. Joe Pesci, usually reserved, acknowledged that working with a child actor like Culkin required patience and adaptation, something he rarely had to consider in his more intense dramatic roles. Daniel Stern embraced his association with Marv, often recounting behind-the-scenes moments with humor. These reflections humanize the actors for fans, making the movies feel even more personal. The legacy of the films includes the impact they had on child actors globally. The massive fame that Culkin experienced became a cautionary tale in Hollywood about the pressures placed on young performers. His story contributed to broader industry conversations about protecting children in entertainment, regulating their work hours, managing their finances, and supporting their mental well-being. In a way, Kevin's iconic independence stood in ironic contrast to Culkin's real-world challenges. Yet, Culkin has since reframed his experience, speaking openly about the importance of boundaries and creative autonomy. His later career choices, selective, unconventional, often playful, show a mature relationship with his childhood fame.
All these layers, nostalgia, psychology, cultural tradition, cinematic craftsmanship, and personal histories intertwine to sustain Home Alone as more than a film. It is a shared cultural memory, a comfort object, a symbol of festive anticipation, and a reminder of the emotional complexity behind seemingly simple family stories. Each December, when millions return to Kevin's world, they aren't simply watching a child outsmart burglars. They're revisiting a story that has matured with them even as it remains lovingly frozen in time. As Home Alone continued to shape holiday traditions around the world, its influence extended far beyond the screen into unexpected corners of society. One of the most fascinating aspects of its legacy lies in the way it became a point of connection between people across different cultures, languages, and backgrounds. Families in Europe, Asia, the Americas, and even regions with limited Christmas traditions embraced Kevin's story, often adapting it to their own cultural contexts. What resonated universally was not the specific holiday setting, but the emotional themes. Feeling misunderstood, longing for independence, and discovering courage when it's needed most. In many households, the film became one of the first introductions to American suburban culture. For viewers growing up outside the United States, the McAllister house, the friendly neighbor, the bustling airport, and the snowy Chicago streets offered glimpses into a world they had never experienced. Children became fascinated with features that were almost exotic to them. Basement furnaces, huge attics, spacious family homes decorated with Christmas lights, and neighborhoods where kids could roam relatively freely. This curiosity shaped how international audiences perceived American childhood, sometimes idealizing it through the lens of the film's warm cinematography and gentle humor. Another interesting element of the film's impact is its relationship with technology and the way advancements have altered how we interpret the story. In the early 90s, the idea of losing track of a child during a chaotic travel morning felt plausible. Families didn't have smartphones, digital calendars, or real-time flight updates. Tickets were physical, communication was limited, and airports were far less digitized. Watching the film today highlights the contrast. Forgetting a child feels impossible when every family member carries a device that constantly tracks messages and locations. Yet instead of undermining the story, this technological distance adds a layer of nostalgia. It allows modern viewers to revisit a period when communication was simpler and sometimes messier, making the film feel like a snapshot of a specific moment in time. In addition to shaping perceptions of childhood, Home Alone contributes to a broader understanding of family dynamics. The McAllister family, with their large household, hectic conversations, and occasional arguments, mirrors the experience of many families during holiday seasons. The film acknowledges that family life can be chaotic, imperfect, and emotionally overwhelming. At the same time, it highlights the deep connections that hold families together even when they fail each other. Kate's determined journey to return to Kevin resonates on a universal level. It is not portrayed as heroic or extraordinary. Instead, it reflects a fundamental instinct, the need to protect and reunite with a child. Viewers recognize themselves or their parents in her desperation and relief. The emotional depth of the film also reflects John Hughes' signature approach to character development. Hughes understood how to write children with realism and respect. Kevin is neither a flawless hero nor a helpless victim. He is capable, resourceful, witty, but also vulnerable, frightened, and occasionally overwhelmed. This complexity makes him relatable. Children see themselves in his frustrations and fears, while adults recognize the subtleties of his emotional growth. Hughes avoided caricature, even in the comedic moments, ensuring that Kevin's experiences felt grounded despite the exaggerated situations he faced. This groundedness stands in contrast with many later family comedies where slapstick is prioritized over emotional authenticity. In Home Alone, physical comedy is always balanced by quieter, introspective moments. Kevin sitting by the Christmas tree, thinking about his family, or speaking with Old Man Marley in the church gives the film emotional weight. These scenes remind viewers that beneath the humor lies a story about loneliness, forgiveness, and the longing for connection. These themes become particularly poignant during the holiday season, when emotions tend to feel heightened and memories more vivid. Another element that contributed to the film's longevity is its depiction of childhood imagination. Kevin's inner world is filled with exaggerated fears, like the furnace roaring like a monster, and exaggerated triumphs, like outsmarting adults. These heightened perceptions reflect how children genuinely experience the world. Everything feels bigger, louder, and more dramatic. The film captures this perspective without mocking it. Instead, it celebrates the creativity and resilience of children, showing that they can rise to challenges with unexpected bravery. The sequel further explored this imaginative perspective by placing Kevin in the overwhelming environment of New York City. The Plaza Hotel, Duncan's toy chest, and the vast city streets became extensions of his fantasy world, places where he could explore independence on an even larger scale. For many international viewers, this film became their first cinematic experience of Manhattan, showcasing the city as magical, chaotic, and full of possibilities. Even though the second film followed many patterns of the first, it expanded the scope in ways that allowed audiences to feel Kevin's excitement and vulnerability in a new context. Beyond its thematic contributions, Home Alone played a role in shaping how holidays are depicted in media. Its combination of humor, emotion, and visual warmth set a standard for future holiday films. Directors and screenwriters often reference it when crafting family comedies, trying to recreate its balance of chaos and charm. Even films released decades later still draw from its structure. A child misinterprets a situation, an emotional journey unfolds, comedic complications arise, and the story resolves with warmth and reunion. Few holiday films manage to capture this structure with the same sincerity, which is why Home Alone often remains the benchmark. The franchise also influenced how cities present themselves during the holidays. Chicago, for example, embraced its connection to the film. Tourism campaigns highlight filming locations, and local businesses reference the movie during the festive season. The same happened with New York, where the Plaza Hotel continues to capitalize on its role in the second film. Visitors reenact Kevin's arrival at the check-in counter, take photos on the staircase, and even stay in rooms inspired by the film's decor. These experiences allow fans to feel momentarily transported into the world they grew up watching. The global influence of Home Alone is further evident in the way it appears across international pop culture. It is quoted in Italian variety shows, referenced in British Christmas specials, and parodied in French and German advertising. The image of Kevin with his hands on his cheeks has become a universal symbol of comedic shock, recognizable even to people who have never seen the film. Merchandise, from toys to sweaters to themed decorations, extends the film's presence into physical spaces around the holiday season. Meanwhile, the actors' personal journeys continued intersecting with their legacy. Catherine O'Hara's resurgence in the 2010s brought renewed attention to her role in the franchise. She regularly recounts stories about filming, often emphasizing how warmly fans still respond to Kate McAllister. Her later success in television deepened public appreciation for her versatility, prompting audiences to revisit the Home Alone films with new admiration. Joe Pesci, after decades of dramatic roles, embraced the contrast that his casting brought to the films.
The juxtaposition of his intense acting style with comedic slapstick created a memorable performance that remains one of the most distinctive in his career. Daniel Stern embraced his status as a cult figure, often sharing behind-the-scenes anecdotes that reveal the playful energy on set. These reflections help fans feel connected not only to the characters, but to the actors themselves. Macaulay Culkin's evolution has been one of the most closely followed aspects of the franchise's history. His early fame, complicated family dynamics, temporary retreat from Hollywood, and eventual return have created a narrative that fans follow almost as closely as the films. Culkin's interviews today show a grounded, self-aware adult who has made peace with his iconic role while maintaining his independence as an artist. His public appearances and creative projects demonstrate a sense of humor and self-acceptance that contrasts with the pressures he once faced. For many fans, seeing Culkin thrive has become a meaningful part of revisiting the films. It adds a layer of emotional satisfaction knowing that the child whose face defined their holidays eventually found stability and balance. By the time Home Alone passed its 30-year mark, it had become not just a film, but a shared emotional space. Each viewing carries memories of previous viewings. Childhood anticipation, family gatherings, quiet evenings on the sofa, or moments of laughter shared with loved ones. The film acts almost like a seasonal anchor, reminding viewers of continuity through time, even as life changes around them.
Perfetto. Ecco, chunk 8, molto lungo, così chiudiamo l'intero documentario sulle 8.000 parole. Stesso tono, solo testo, finale completo. Pie. Mental health.
As Home Alone entered its fourth decade of existence, the conversation around the film evolved into something broader. Not just a celebration of its humor and holiday atmosphere, but an exploration of why certain stories remain timeless while others fade. Film scholars, critics, and everyday viewers increasingly recognized that the enduring appeal of Kevin McAllister's story reflects deeper truths about family relationships, childhood anxieties, and the emotional rituals surrounding the holiday season. What initially seemed like a simple comedy gradually revealed layers that resonated across generations, cultures, and technological shifts. One of the most significant aspects of this lasting appeal is the film's emotional honesty. Beneath the elaborate traps, the comedic timing, and the festive music lies a narrative grounded in vulnerability. Kevin begins the story feeling overlooked and undervalued, trapped in the chaos of a large family where his voice struggles to be heard. His wish to be left alone isn't malicious. It reflects a child's longing for recognition and respect. When he wakes up to an empty house, his initial excitement quickly turns into fear and loneliness. The film allows space for these emotions, showing Kevin grow not through grand gestures, but through simple acts of courage. Going to the store by himself, confronting his fears of the basement, and reaching out to the neighbor he once feared. This portrayal of growth resonates because it reflects real childhood experiences. Many viewers remember moments when they felt unseen or misunderstood, or times when they were forced to confront fears they didn't yet know how to articulate. Kevin's journey gives those memories a story to inhabit. When he prepares traps for the burglars, it's not about violence or vengeance. It's about reclaiming control over his environment. When he befriends Old Man Marley, it's about acknowledging the need for connection. And when he finally reunites with his mother, the emotional payoff feels earned because the film has taken its time building toward it. Another reason the film remains relevant lies in the way it portrays adulthood. Kate McAllister's frantic journey home mirrors the universal terror of parental guilt. She is not framed as a negligent or careless figure, but as a loving parent overwhelmed by circumstances.
Her determination to return to Kevin, offering strangers necklaces, bargaining at airports, and enduring long detours, resonates deeply with anyone who has ever loved someone and feared they had failed them. John Hughes understood that parental love is often messy, driven by instinct rather than perfection. This honesty makes the film relatable not only to children, but to adults who see their own fears and hopes reflected in Kate's desperation. As the years passed, many viewers began celebrating the film not only as part of their childhood, but as part of their adulthood. Watching Home Alone with nostalgic eyes often brings subtle details into focus. The stress of organizing a holiday trip, the chaos of crowded family homes, the emotional weight of traditions that hold families together. The film becomes a mirror through which people observe how their roles have changed, from identifying with Kevin to identifying with Kate, from seeing the house as a playground to seeing it as a symbol of responsibility and warmth. At the same time, broader cultural conversations began to place Home Alone in the context of holiday storytelling. For decades, Christmas films often followed predictable structures centered on romance, fantasy, or moral lessons. Home Alone introduced something different, a story driven by a child's perspective, anchored in realism but elevated by humor and emotion. It presented the holidays as a time when ordinary life becomes chaotic, magical, and emotionally charged. Its success encouraged studios to explore new angles within holiday cinema, emphasizing authenticity over sentimentality, comedy over melodrama, and everyday characters over idealized families. The influence of the franchise extended into other creative fields as well. Directors, writers, and actors frequently cite Home Alone as an early inspiration for their storytelling tastes. It demonstrated that a film could be warm without being overly sentimental, funny without losing emotional credibility, and adventurous without abandoning realism. Many contemporary family films incorporate elements reminiscent of Kevin's journey, empowering young protagonists, balancing physical humor with introspective moments, and portraying family dynamics with a mix of affection and imperfection. In recent years, the film's impact has been amplified by how it circulates in digital culture. Social media platforms celebrate Home Alone annually with memes, fan art, trivia threads, and nostalgic montages. Young viewers who weren't born when the film was released discover Kevin's world through reaction videos, edited clips, and digital discourse. The film has become a multi-generational touchpoint, connecting millennials who saw it in theaters, Gen Z viewers who grew up with DVDs and streaming, and even younger children encountering it for the first time online. Each group interprets the story through a slightly different lens, but all share the same emotional attachment. Meanwhile, academic and critical analyses have added new layers to the film's legacy. Scholars examine its exploration of independence, its depiction of suburban life at the end of the 20th century, and its role in shaping holiday cinema. Others explore the symbolism of the McAllister house, the function of fear in childhood storytelling, or the film's representation of community through characters like Old Man Marley and the Pigeon Lady. These interpretations highlight the richness of a story that, on the surface, appears simple but contains a surprising emotional depth. At the same time, the personal stories of the actors continue to inform how audiences connect with the film. Catherine O'Hara's later success brought renewed attention to her early work, with fans revisiting her performance through the lens of her comedic brilliance. Joe Pesci's return to acting in later years sparked renewed affection for his eclectic filmography, reminding audiences that he could excel in both intense drama and lighthearted comedy. Fans continue to celebrate Daniel Stern for his memorable physical performances, often revisiting interviews where he recounts the stunts he performed and the camaraderie on set. Macaulay Culkin's journey, in particular, has become intertwined with the emotional memory of the franchise. His ability to embrace his past while maintaining his autonomy as an adult resonates with audiences who grew up watching him. Culkin's humor, resilience, and reflective insights into his childhood fame have allowed fans to feel a sense of closure, as though the child they once rooted for has found peace and stability. This sense of narrative harmony strengthens the connection viewers feel to the films. Ultimately, the lasting power of Home Alone comes from how it reflects the fragility and beauty of human relationships. It is a story about misunderstandings, fears, and mistakes, but also about forgiveness, courage, and the bonds that bring families back together. It is a reminder that even in chaotic times, there is room for growth, humor, and connection. The film remains a comforting presence because it acknowledges the emotional complexity of childhood and adulthood, capturing moments that feel universal. As new generations continue to discover Kevin McAllister's world, the story remains as vibrant as ever. The snowy streets of Chicago, the warm lights of the McAllister house, the mischievous traps, the heartfelt conversations in the church, and the emotional embrace at the end, all these elements form a mosaic of memories that viewers carry with them year after year. In this way, Home Alone becomes more than a film. It becomes a part of personal history, a shared cultural anchor, and a gentle reminder of the resilience found in both children and families. And so, decades after its release, Kevin's adventure still returns each holiday season, unchanged, familiar, and timeless, inviting viewers to laugh, remember, and reconnect with the emotions that define this beloved story.